Welcome to Keystone Cold Cases, a podcast that aims to reignite cold cases across Pennsylvania. We are here to bring attention to the stories that have faded into the background, honoring the victims and their families along the way. Each episode is a step closer to understanding the truth, because every case deserves more than just a passing glance, and every voice deserves to be heard.
Hey, this is Lindsay, and I'm here with Shannon and Carrie tonight. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Good. It was a little bit warmer today, so that was kind of nice.
True. Yeah, after the freezing, frigid cold, it does feel a little bit warm when it's like, 45, 50 degrees.
Almost balmy.
Right?
Yeah.
Where are my shorts?
When I went to work today, I didn't have gas, so I couldn't use my auto start, and I was so upset. And then when I went outside, I was like, "Oh, it's warm. This is okay."
Nice.
All right, so let's get into it. So just as a reminder, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at KCC Pod, and Facebook and YouTube at Keystone Cold Cases. We are releasing current episodes now on YouTube every Friday afternoon, and we are also in the process of releasing our older episodes. So don't forget to like or subscribe to all of our social media pages. We love hearing your thoughts on each case, so don't be shy. Drop a comment, send us a message at keystonecoldcases@gmail.com, or share the episode with a friend who loves true crime as much as you do. Your engagement really helps us grow and reach more listeners. And then just as a quick reminder that we do our best to research every case thoroughly and share our sources at kccpod.com. That said, we can't take responsibility for any errors or inaccuracies in the original materials that we reference. All right, so I am going to hop into it, and we are going to go out west to the Pittsburgh area. So some stories refuse to stay quiet, not because they're unsolved, but because too many pieces still feel painfully loud. On a cold, fog-heavy February morning in 2002, a burning Jeep on Pittsburgh North Side revealed something far worse than a vehicle fire. Inside was Jamie Lynn Stickle, a woman whose life had been built on connection, community, and visibility, and whose death would be labeled in a word that still haunts the people who loved her: undetermined. This is not just the story of how Jamie died. It's the story of how someone so present could vanish into ambiguity, how evidence can speak while some systems hesitate, and how a community has spent more than 20 years asking the same questions. Who did this, and why has no one been held accountable? Jamie Stickle was the kind of person who was hard to avoid in the Pittsburgh's LGBTQ plus community. Not because she demanded attention, but because she was everywhere people needed someone. She worked as a bartender and a manager at downtown gay bars such as Sidekicks and Images, but her role extended far beyond the bar. Jamie was known as a fundraiser, a community organizer, and a reliable presence. If there was a benefit, a ribbon sale, a charity night, or a cause that needed visibility, Jamie was often behind it. Several notable movements that Jamie was a part of included Pittsburgh AIDS Task Force, Shepherd Wellness Community, and National Multiple Sclerosis Society. She primarily focused on breast cancer research and AIDS relief. Not just promoting it, but working it, talking to people, remembering names, pulling others into the effort. Friends and coworkers described her as jovial, generous, and deeply social. Someone whose energy made spaces feel safer and more connected.
She sounds like a rock star in her community.
Truly, because you also have to remember that this is the early 2000s. So you had to be a pretty confident person to be working on a lot of these causes,
Right.
And supporting them, especially in that time frame. In the early 2000s, Pittsburgh LGBTQ nightlife scene was tight-knit. Liberty Avenue was a hub, and the bars weren't just places to drink, they were community centers, networking spaces, and informal support systems. Jamie moved easily through this world. She wasn't a peripheral figure, she was a familiar face behind the bar. Someone people trusted, someone who noticed when a regular didn't show up. That visibility matters, because when Jamie was killed, the shock wasn't just about the violence, it was about the rupture. Someone so known, so woven into daily routines was suddenly gone. The night Jamie died began like countless others. She finished her shift at Sidekicks, sometimes around midnight. After work, she stopped at other downtown bars, including Pegasus. Later, she attempted to enter an after-hours club, but was turned away because she appeared intoxicated. This detail has been repeated in reporting, not to assign blame, but to establish vulnerability and timing. It was late. She had been out for hours. She was likely tired from a long day of work and then being out on the town.
Bartended for many years, and the shift itself can be exhausting, but by the time your shift ends, it's really common to get that second wind and want to go blow off some steam. The after hours bars tend to have a lot of patrons from the service industry, like at least the ones that I've gone to after a late shift.
Yes, definitely. When I was a bartender too. And there's a whole group of us that would go out. We would all get to the bar pretty late, usually after midnight when we closed, the restaurants and other bars that we worked at. And, that second wind definitely comes. And then you add a few drinks on top of it, and that just like wakes you up it's in itself.
Yep.
So eventually after, stopping at a couple different places and being turned away from one, eventually Jamie did head home alone. Her apartment was located on Chesper Street on Pittsburgh's north side, in an area that feels very different at night than it does during the day. The neighborhood around the George Warhol scrap metal yard is industrial, bordered by warehouses, scrap operations, infrastructure. It's not really a residential street. There's no neighbors sitting on stoops. Traffic isn't passing by steadily. Jamie lived in an upstairs apartment that was attached to or adjacent to the scrapyard property. So it was isolated. It was quiet. It was dark. If someone were watching, waiting, or following her, there would be little to interrupt them.
Definitely gives off vibes that something questionable wouldn't be out of place there.
Yeah, I'm very curious if she often walked home alone. She seems like she'd be very confident. She's giving those confident vibes and very strong, independent.
Yeah, and I mean, based on her known presence in the community, I feel like I would also have some form of confidence and comfortability in walking home alone. She's well known, so it's something she probably did pretty often.
We're talking, 20 plus years ago, so it's kind of
Right.
a different time. I know we say that a lot in episodes. It was a different time, but it seems now where back then I would be fine walking home. I wouldn't have I wasn't the type to scare easily, mostly because I raised my kids on my own, so I was kind of one of those I was very alert all the time, but today, I don't have that same kind of confidence that I would feel comfortable walking at night by myself.
No.
It's like we know more.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. And I think part of it too is just the population has grown. So, it becomes more dangerous because of more people, I feel like. I think a lot of this stuff was happening before. It was just happening less frequently. There's a lot more people now. But I totally get that walking alone thing. I live in a very, very safe neighborhood. But it's dark. I live in the woods. So when I get home later at night, even right now at 7 o'clock and it's pitch black, I'm rushing to the door from my driveway. Because it's a different atmosphere nowadays, I feel like. All right, so this occurred on February 8th, 2002, and the weather records for this day show that the early morning hours, they were cold, they were damp, it was foggy, mist hung in the air from at least 1 a.m. through 4 a.m. according to old records. Temperatures hovered around the upper 20s to the lower 30s, so really cold. And as we all know, fog dulls sound. It shortens your eye, you can't see as far. Sight lines are distorted. It absorbs light, so it becomes darker, and that creepy kind of darkness. So the conditions for that morning would have made the area feel even more enclosed, more private, quiet, the place where something could happen without drawing a whole lot of attention. So investigators did later say that there was evidence Jamie made it to her apartment door. They did find blood on the door itself. There were strands of hair. Items believed to have been in her hand were found nearby. Outside her belongings were scattered. These items included money, makeup. She did have mace with her. They weren't placed. They weren't dropped neatly. They were kind of displaced and all over the place. So an unorganized mess pretty much indicates that maybe they may have been dropped during a panic or a scuffle. A trail of blood did appear to lead from the doorway back towards her Jeep.
That is so heartbreaking. She was so close to making it home. And imagine her hand on that doorknob, and then she realized something's going on. She goes to grab her mace, and she just didn't have the opportunity to get to use it.
Yeah. And I think that too, sometimes like when it's late at night and it's, depending on how you're feeling, I know for myself, I've gotten to my door before and I'm like kind of, ooh, let me rush and quick get inside and lock the door.
Mm-hmm.
So I can like imagine that like panic.
It's like a horror movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the implication was clear. Something happened at the threshold of her home. Investigators would later acknowledge that the scene bore the hallmarks of a violent encounter, even early on in their investigation. Based on the physical evidence, investigators believe Jamie was assaulted near the entrance of the apartment building and then moved back towards her vehicle. Blood was reportedly found on the Jeep's door handle, suggesting contact during the movement. The vehicle was parked close enough to the entrance that the transfer from the doorway to the car had left physical traces, such as her items being all over. It was not a situation involving a medical emergency or collapse inside the home. So she didn't have something happen and she was trying to get herself to the car. They definitely think that somebody else was involved in this. Involved force, and continued beyond the initial attack. So at some point after Jamie was placed inside the Jeep, the vehicle was set on fire. Firefighters were dispatched to the scene shortly before 4 a.m., so this is still during that time period when it was really foggy. At first, it appeared to be a vehicle fire, the kind that, while it was serious, it's not unusual enough to immediately suggest that there was a homicide. But once the flames were extinguished, responders did realize that there was a body inside, which was Jamie's. The autopsy revealed one of the most critical facts in the case. Jamie had inhaled smoke. There was soot in her airway, so this meant that she was alive when the fire initially started. That detail alone transformed the scene from suspicious to horrifying. Whatever happened to Jamie did not end quickly. She did not die before the fire. She experienced it. One of her friends later said, "We know what happened to her. What we don't know is why no one will call it what it is."
This is like unbelievably horrific and next level evil. Like, I just hope she was unconscious when this fire was started and was not like restrained in the car and awake,
Right.
and conscious when all this was going on.
Yeah, I agreed. If she were awake, just what a terrifying fate if somehow she were tied up. But I agree. I'm hoping she was unconscious.
So, and yet, despite the blood, the signs of a struggle, and the evidence that she was alive during the fire, the case ran into a devastating obstacle. The fire caused such extensive damage to Jamie's body that the medical examiner could not determine a definitive cause of death beyond the effects of the fire itself. There was no way to conclusively identify fatal trauma separate from the burning. So because of this, the manner of death was ruled undetermined. That ruling would come to define the case. Police acknowledged that while the evidence suggested foul play, the fire destroyed the very proof they would have needed to confirm it definitively.
Sort of understand the reason for ruling it undetermined, because of that. But I mean, it's pretty clear that somebody else was responsible, regardless of what evidence was present. And personally, I think, Personally, I think homicide is more appropriate to list as the manner of death, even if you can't find any other evidence. She, she did
Right.
not set herself on fire in the
Right.
car.
Right. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that decision was just rushed. It was obvious she was murdered. They just didn't know exactly how. So it doesn't make any sense. Oh, undetermined. Oh, you know what happened. She was murdered.
Yeah, and I think that even just from all of the other evidence leading up to it, like, okay, I understand. If it was just a body in a car and you had nothing else to go off of, I could see that as not being ruled as homicide. But this, I mean, they found blood, they found, evidence of a struggle,
Right.
of something
Right.
happening to her. So that in combination with it is what is kind of like, really?
Right.
Yeah, so to Jamie's friends, family, and community, undetermined felt like a technicality that erased the obvious. Blood on the door, a trail back to the Jeep, scattered belongings, a fire set while she was alive. To them, the idea that this was not officially labeled a homicide felt like an injustice layered on top of violence. But procedurally, that classification mattered. It shaped how the case was handled, how it was prioritized, and how it was remembered. In the weeks after Jamie's death, the LGBTQ community mobilized. Vigils were held outside her apartment, fundraisers were organized, a reward fund was established in the hope that someone would come forward with information. The campaign became known as United for Jamie. Pittsburgh City Council formally honored her by proclaiming a Jamie Lynn Stickle Day, recognizing her years of fundraising and community service. Her death was not allowed to fade quietly.
I love that so much. It shows how much of an impact she truly had on her community.
Yeah, definitely. So, police questioned numerous people. Jamie's longtime girlfriend, from whom she had recently separated, was interviewed early and reportedly cleared after providing an alibi. Detectives explored the possibility of arson, but investigators later said no accelerants were detected. And the exact cause of the fire could not be conclusively determined. So, without a clear ignition source and without a definitive medical ruling, the case stalled. Despite periodic reviews and renewed attention over the years, Jamie Stickle's manner of death has never been reclassified. It officially remains undetermined.
Seriously? Like, maybe we need to add another line to that report stating probable homicide, maybe slashed undetermined.
I mean, it just kind of goes back to what even like her family and friends said, and what we've said on here a couple of times during this conversation, that there's so many other things pointing to homicide than just the fire. I think that they're like harping so much on this fire that they're not paying attention to all the other pieces of it.
Right.
So as months turned into years, theories did begin to circulate. Some believe that Jamie was targeted, that someone knew where she lived and waited for her. A former investigator later suggested the possibility that the assault was planned, even speculating that outside individuals may have been involved. Others wondered whether Jamie had been followed home after an interaction earlier in the night that escalated once she reached her door. Some raised the possibility of a hate crime, given her visibility and prominence in the LGBTQ community. Investigators did not rule out that Jamie's visibility within the LGBTQ community may have been relevant, but no evidence ever emerged that allowed the case to be formally classified as a hate crime. And I was thinking about this a little bit too. Like, you work as a bartender. I mean, I'm sure, I don't know, Shannon, when you were a bartender, if you ever experienced that, like, upset patrons or people that get really angry, things like that. And when I was a bartender, it happened all the time. So I can only imagine that,
especially
like
the ones that don't like to get
at some point.
Yeah, the ones that don't like to be cut off or flagged.
Right, that's what I was just thinking. Yeah.
Sometimes sometimes some people are just, affected by alcohol in a way that makes them like hostile or angry. And if somebody looks at them the wrong way, they go off the handle. If somebody bumps their stool, they go off the handle. It's just like alcohol just does not mix well with a lot of personalities, especially I know from experience. It is very hard to cut somebody off because you don't know what kind of reaction you're going to get.
That's scary.
Yeah. Especially, it's more prevalent nowadays, but like bartenders can be held responsible for over serving someone. And, if God forbid they go cause an accident or kill somebody, like it can track back to the bar where they were overserved. So it's not a vocation I want to revisit at all.
I bet. And it's such a gray line too. It's like gray area. Like not everybody has the same tolerance, obviously, and
right.
But yeah, maybe she pissed somebody off and they wanted to get back at her. That's awful.
Yeah, I think that just because of the nature of her involvement in the community and her involvement working in bars, like there's just so many like roads you can go down exploring all of the what if possibilities in this particular case for sure, because there's so many scenarios that probably could have happened that were never even explored. Yeah. So at this point, none of these theories were ever proven. No suspect was publicly named. No arrest was made. So what lingered pretty much was silence. More than 2 decades later, Jamie's case has been re-examined through long-form storytelling. Most notably, there's a multi-episode investigative podcast called The Girl with the Same Name. This is hosted by a writer and an actor who happens to share Jamie's name. So the podcast approaches the case not as a single mystery to be summarized, but as layered story shaped by evidence, classification, community trauma, and time. It includes interviews with people who knew Jamie, revisits early reporting, and interrogates how the undetermined ruling may have limited the investigation's trajectory. So the existence of a multi-episode podcast is itself telling. Jamie's case cannot be neatly contained in one telling, one article, or one episode. It sprawls across nightlife culture, forensic limitations, institutional constraints, and the emotional memory of a community that never accepted the official ambiguity. A family member later reflected, this isn't just an unsolved case, it's a question that never stopped being asked. Jamie Stickle was 33 years old. She was a fundraiser, a bartender, a manager, a friend, and a familiar presence in the city that still remembers her. She lived in an isolated industrial pocket where something violent unfolded on the early hours of a cold, fog-shrouded morning. Her death remains officially undetermined, but for those who continue to revisit the case, it has never felt resolved. Jamie Stickle's case matters because it shows what happens when violence collides with isolation, visibility, and procedural limits. She didn't disappear. Her death was discovered. Evidence existed, and yet the system stopped short of naming what many believe they were seeing. Undetermined does more than describe uncertainty. It creates it. So it slowed the momentum. It narrows investigative paths. And over time, it allows cases like Jamie's to drift without resolution. The case also matters because Jamie was not a loner. She was known. She was trusted. She was woven into the daily fabric of her community. If someone like Jamie can be lost to ambiguity, it raises deeper questions about who's protected, who's prioritized, who's remembered. And finally, the case matters because someone knows what happened. That truth did not burn in the fire. It did not disappear with time. It's lived somewhere, quietly, for more than 20 years. The unanswered question is no longer just what happened to Jamie Stickle, it's whether the truth is still being carried by someone who has never said it out loud.
Horrible story. I mean, great coverage, just
right.
The circumstances, just awful.
Feels like they just didn't put enough effort into it. Makes me sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, and kind of like what, the other podcast that has talked about this, like so much of it is all just circumstantial, like this could have happened, like, just kind of going down those different paths of, this could have happened, or that could have happened, there wasn't a lot more of like physical evidence. There wasn't a lot of named people. They got to that undetermined ruling so fast that like everything else just stopped. Like they don't investigate it at that point.
Right.
So it is definitely like a really sad story. Like something happened to Jamie, and you know, I can feel for her friends and family and community for wanting to know like why it's ruled this way and trying to dig more, like, for sure.
Is there an email or a phone number that anyone that with knowledge of the case can call to either like submit tips anonymously or even not anonymous?
That's a really hard thing to say.
I can't say it. I can say it when I said it once. Fine, anonymously or not. How's that?
I do believe that there was, and I did not write it down on here.
But you can include it in the show notes afterwards, right?
Yeah, we'll definitely have it on the website.
Yeah, I'll include all of that in there. Yeah, because there was, and especially the other podcast, I mean, the woman that shares the same name as Jamie is very devoted to that cause. She has done a lot of research. She's got a lot, you know, on her website. So I'm sure that there's definitely ways to get those tips out there, even though it's not really being actively investigated. Or I don't even know if undetermined means that it's a cold case. I think that it just means that like, oh, we can't figure it out. So
right. Moving on, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if I learned anything from Yellowstone, changing suicide to undetermined reopened the case. So, I mean, just saying. Just saying. But I mean, it's, you know, it doesn't really close it when you think about it in terms of, you know, common sense, right? It's undetermined. So we can't say one way or another what the matter was. So we can't really stop trying to answer that question. At least that's how I view it.
No, it's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I don't know, my mind still really can't wrap around how it's undetermined and not homicide based on all the other pieces of it.
Right.
That's all we have for this episode of the Keystone Cold Cases podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and please consider leaving us a review wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to find out more about the podcast, the hosts, and the cases we cover, or if you want to suggest a case, please visit us at kccpod.com or send us an email at keystonecoldcases@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook at Keystone Cold Cases and on Instagram and TikTok at kccpod. Follow us on YouTube at Keystone Cold Cases, and please remember never to reach out to family or friends of the victims, only to law enforcement if you have any tips. This episode was researched and hosted by me, Lindsay, and you can find all of our sources, social information, and contact information at KCC Pod. Theme music by Darren Meekins and production assistance from Shannon Bickle. Join us again next week for another case to sleuth out.